We go to these places, these temples of spectacle, to see a story we already know. We crave the ritual, the hero, the villain, the rise, the fall. We want the comfort of the predictable, the thrill of seeing the script played out to perfection. We think we are there for the noise, for the explosions, and for the pyro. But we are not. We are there, waiting in the dark, for the one thing we never expect to see. We are waiting for the script to tear. We are waiting for something real. And on this night, in front of 80,000 people who thought they knew the ending, the script didn't just tear. It evaporated. The atmosphere was thick with finality. You could smell the ozone from the lights and the stale popcorn from the upper decks. This was the main event, the final act of the play. On one side, Marcus the Titan Stone. He wasn't just a champion. He was an institution, a mountain of certainty. On the other, Leo Vector Vance. All heart, all fire. But ultimately, to everyone in that building, he was the sacrificial lamb. The music of the match, its violent rhythm, was hitting its crescendo. The Titan hoisted Leo up for his finishing move, the cornerstone. A move that had ended 100 matches, a move from which no one ever got up. The thud was sickening. Final. The referee, a man whose face we've seen for 20 years, slid into position. The crowd was already reaching for their coats. They've seen this ending 100 times. The hand slapped the mat. 1. Leo was motionless. The camera zoomed in on the Titan's impassive face, already looking past his opponent, toward the fireworks that would signal his victory. The hand slapped the mat again. 2. This is how it always ends. This is the script. The ritual is almost complete. The entire stadium takes a collective breath, ready to exhale in a polite, predictable cheer. The referee's hand, raised high for the final count, freezes mid-air. It doesn't come down. The predictable exhale is caught, trapped in the throat of the arena. The moment it happened, even the commentators went silent. You could hear the click of their headsets as the mics cut out. Not intentionally, but in a universal biological response to impossibility. The referee wasn't frozen by choice. His hand, poised for the 3, was being held. From the mat, Leo Vance, the man who was finished, whose story was over, had snaked his hand up and clamped it around the referee's wrist. It wasn't a kick-out. It wasn't a rope break. It was a rejection. A human no. 80,000 people saw it, but no one understood it. The Titan, Marcus Stone, stared down. His expression, usually a mask of stoic control, flickered. It was the first crack in the marble. The silence was the most terrifying sound anyone had ever heard in that building. It wasn't the quiet between cheers. It was the sound of a vacuum. The sound of 80,000 brains trying to process a glitch in the matrix. The sound of a story breaking its own rules. One move, 1 second, and the world stopped turning. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't wrestling. It was something else. And in that shared, breathless void, the entire multi-million-dollar production, the lights, the cameras, the pyro, all of it felt suddenly small and fragile. After the silence comes the sound. It wasn't a cheer, it was a gasp. A single, unified 80,000-person gasp that sounded less like excitement and more like a skyscraper's windows shattering all at once. The sound of confusion. The referee, a veteran of 20 years, looked at his own hand, trapped in Leo's grip, as if it were a foreign object. He tried to pull it free, but Leo's eyes were open now, staring, not at the ref, but through him, at the Titan. The Titan took a half-step back, a predator confused by prey that refused to die. Then the gasp turned to a roar. It was a raw, primal noise, full of questions. What is this? Did you see that? Is this real? The commentators fumbled for words. I don't know what we're seeing, one stammered. This is unprecedented. The other just repeated the word, no, no, no. The match continued, but it didn't matter. The rest was a blur. The real event had already happened. The bell rang eventually. A confused, hollow sound. No one even remembers who won. They only remember the moment the story stopped, and reality looked them in the face. Within 60 seconds, it was everywhere. The clip, filmed on a dozen shaky phones from Section 314, hit the internet not like a wave, but like a virus. This move just broke the internet. But move was the wrong word. It was an act, a refusal. The social media platforms weren't just buzzing, they were convulsing. The official broadcast feed tried to cut away, to show the Titan raising his belt, but the producers knew it was useless. The real feed was the grainy phone footage, looping endlessly. The hand, the ref's confused face, the Titan's flicker of doubt. It was the modern-day Zapruder film for sports entertainment. News outlets, legitimate sports channels who wouldn't touch wrestling, were running the clip. Not in their sports segment, but in their Trending Now segment. They didn't analyze the match, they analyzed the humanity. A refusal to accept fate, one anchor called it. The moment a performer became a protester, wrote another. The company's carefully crafted narrative was gone. In its place was this raw, accidental truth, a 4-second loop that had become the biggest story in the world. Backstage, the air was thick. The gorilla position, the small curtained-off area just behind the entrance, is where the truth lives. When Marcus, the Titan Stone, stormed through that curtain, the silence was different. It was heavy, and it was angry. He threw the championship belt onto a crate. It wasn't a celebration. It was an accusation. What was that? He seethed, not to anyone in particular, but to the room. The producers, the writers, the boss himself, they all looked at the floor. They were supposed to be the gods of this universe, pulling the strings, but their puppet had just pulled back. Marcus wasn't angry that he looked weak. He was angry because the illusion was broken. He was the conductor of an orchestra, and Leo, the second violin, had just decided to play a screaming guitar solo in the middle of Beethoven's Fifth. It was unprofessional. It was dangerous. You control your opponent, his own father, a legend, had told him. You protect the story. And in one desperate, selfish gesture, Leo had endangered them all. He had exposed the magic trick. And in this world, exposing the trick is the only unforgivable sin. Leo Vance didn't even remember doing it. He walked back through the curtain 20 minutes later, his gear still on, his adrenaline fading into a cold, sickening dread. He remembered the thud of the mat. He remembered the feeling of his lungs emptying. He remembered the smell of the referee's shirt. And then just an instinct, a primal rejection, a part of his brain that was older than storytelling, older than contracts and scripts, simply said, no, not like this. He hadn't done it to be a hero. He hadn't done it to go into business for himself. He had done it because, for 1/10 of a second, he forgot it was a performance. He was just a man who did not want to fail. Now, standing in front of the boss, he was just a man who was about to be fired. Explain, the boss said, his voice quiet, which was always worse than yelling. Leo opened his mouth. What could he say? I didn't want to lose. It sounded pathetic, childish, but the boss just stared at him, a strange, unreadable look in his eyes. He wasn't looking at an employee. He was looking at a problem, or a gold mine. The fallout wasn't just professional, it was personal. Marcus Stone went home, not to his mansion, but to the fortress he had built to keep the world out. His wife met him at the door. She hadn't watched the match. She never watched. She just watched the news. Are you okay? She asked, her voice laced with a genuine, unfamiliar concern. She had seen the clip. She didn't see a performer. She saw her husband, the most confident man in the world, hesitate. She saw the look of confusion, of doubt, that he never ever showed at home. That single moment of uncertainty had breached the walls of his character and invaded his life. For Leo, the call was different. It was from his father, an old-school wrestler from the territories. Leo expected a lecture. He didn't get one. There was a long pause on the line. "You're in trouble, son," his father said, his voice gravelly. "Not with the office. You're in trouble with the business. There are rules. You broke the most important one. You didn't protect your opponent. You didn't protect the story. They don't forget that." The locker room was a graveyard the next day. No one knew what to say. The old guard, the veterans who had built their lives on the foundation of trust and professionalism, looked at Leo with quiet contempt. To them, he was a liability. He had proven he couldn't be trusted when the lights were bright. "What if he'd hurt him?" one whispered. "What if Marcus wasn't expecting it? He exposed us all." But the younger generation, the ones who had grown up on the internet, who understood that viral was more valuable than technical, they saw it differently. They saw a man who had created the single most talked about moment in decades. He hadn't just gotten heat, he had gotten mainstream attention. He had made wrestling feel real again, if only for a second. This wasn't a breach of trust, it was a stroke of genius. The pressure of legacy was crushing Marcus. He was the standard bearer. But Leo had just become the future. And the two philosophies, respect for the past and hunger for the future, were now at war. The next night, the flagship show opened. No music, no explosions, just a single light on the ring. The company, faced with a narrative wildfire they couldn't control, did the only thing they could. They leaned into it. The show didn't open with highlights. It opened with the silence. They replayed the clip, but this time they didn't cut away. They let the silence hang in the arena, letting the audience relive that uncomfortable, electric void. They let the commentators' confused voices echo. "We don't know what to tell you." The story was no longer about the championship. It was about the question. Why? Why did he do it? What did it mean? The Titan, Marcus Stone, came out, not with his usual pyro, but with a slow, deliberate walk. He held a microphone. He looked at the crowd, and the crowd was silent, waiting. They weren't waiting for a catchphrase. They were waiting for an answer. The move had given the entire multi-million-dollar corporation a gift it hadn't had in years: genuine, raw, unpredictable suspense. The script was gone. And for the first time, no one, not the fans, not the writers, not even the wrestlers, knew what was going to happen next. But here is the secret, the twist, the part everyone missed because they were all looking at the wrong man. We rewatched the clip, not 100 times but 1,000. We obsessed over Leo's hand, over the referee's shock. We were wrong. The move that broke the arena wasn't Leo's hand grabbing the referee. The move was what Marcus Stone did immediately after. Look closer. Watch the Titan's eyes. He sees the hand. He sees the defiance. His training, his entire career, told him to end it, to pull the ref away, to pin Leo again harder, to assert the script, to restore order. But he didn't. For one full second, the Titan hesitated. He let the moment happen. He saw the fire in Leo's eyes. He heard the 80,000-person gasp, and he made a choice. He allowed the reality to break. The story isn't about an underdog who refused to lose. It's about a champion who, for the first time in his career, doubted if he deserved to win. The hand grab was just a question. The Titan's hesitation was the answer. That was the moment the arena broke. The moment a god looked mortal.